We're going to do transparency here, and I'm going to show you why I teach you this. This value here of this oval and this value where they intersect, notice they get darker. So pretend like this had a numerical value of 3 and this had a numerical value of 3. This would essentially be a 6. Okay? That's the transparency. Think of, here's my arm, sunglasses over the top of it. Notice how that whole area gets darker. Okay? That's transparency. But you can also do it in a different way too, and that is, say you've got a value here that I've given, this area. Let's say this circle here, this oval here, overlapping it is white. Like something like this. Here's my arm, and here's the white over the top. Notice it's going to get lighter where it's crossed over. Okay? That's this here. This is where you take your kneaded eraser and you lighten up this area. And see, that creates a transparency too. Okay? Transparencies are important for a lot of ways. And you've got some give and take on this. You may decide to have 3 and 3. You can even go darker if you want to. Now you're probably going to be using this as a compositional element in an early drawing procedure, but you can use it later when it comes to realism. First thing is the idea of the cast shadow. Look at my arm. When something goes over the top of it, notice you see that cast shadow of my other arm over the top? That's essentially a transparency. But you'll notice that it goes around my arm. So I'm going to pretend like there's something here. The sunlight's coming from this direction here, or a strong light source. And it's hitting my apple here. So naturally the cast shadow behind it is coming off in some way. Sometimes it's real strong like it is right now and we get sort of a real delineated edge. Maybe some extra edges around the side. Like that type of thing. And sometimes it just goes straight out. Okay? That just depends on what the light source is doing. Alright? Let's get that parked up around the bottom end there. That's going to drive me nuts. Okay, so highlights work the same way too. Notice there's a highlight, at least from my viewpoint, right here, and maybe a back one from here because it's backlit. Notice I put down all the form first, then I erase out the highlight to go with it. Does that make sense? Or back here. That is called working it with the form. If you did it like this, that's a problem. But if you had a sharp contrast right here, remember it's going to arc around the form. It's going to follow the form, all right? That's putting a highlight in an apple, all right? But if you're going to put a cast shadow over this apple, remember it's going to do the same thing. Let's pretend like that arm was going over the top of this guy. I think it's kind of ugly, but we're going to do it anyway for today's demo. I'm going to make sort of a map as to where my shadow is falling. And I literally just drop over this whole, all of this gets darker. But notice how this transparency moves with the form where that cast shadow is going to be. It's going to be lighter here. And it's going to get darker as it comes down this way. can still, and all of the things are still there, but that cast shadow over the top goes with the form. So it's getting lighter up here, just like the form is, but it's just a transparency over the top of it. There we go, that's better. There's my tube, my cast shadow tube. And if I want to have that highlight back in there, or that little bit of that light, I can still add it in there, okay? Or any sort of textures or anything like that. All of that can still stay on it, okay? And it's going to come down into here. All right, okay, that's a cast shadow. Pretend like it's coming out from this direction. Some long tube thing is casting a shadow over my apple, like a pole or something. There we go. That's a cast shadow. And you can up its intensity or reduce it as you need to, depending on what the situation calls for and what the drawing calls for, okay? That's a cast shadow, all right? Get the bottom back in here properly. Some of that textural linear element working with the form always. See, my apple's got a little bit of a texture there with the form, okay? That's working with the form. Now this is the last thing I wanted to show you, and that is sometimes a transparency is coming over the top of something dark, like say this net over this area of black fabric, okay? Again, just like we did with lace and some of the other things, don't forget to use your material to make it work for you. I've got this charcoal laid down here, and I've already sprayed it with either fixative or hairspray. And then you simply lightly drag and let the texture of the paper be your guide. If you've got a fold in your lace, add a little bit more whiteness. Here it is over the top of hairspray. Remember those fixatives and hairsprays. Let's put this down a little bit more here. See how that creates sort of a little fold over here? And you carefully add in as much or as little as you want. But you have to be very careful about this, because you just, once you've added it, there ain't no going back, because it makes a muddy mess. You remember the, let's put a little bit, clean that up over there. You can go back over it like this, and maybe a little like this if you want to add some. But the less you fool with it, the better, okay? And let's get them dark under here real quick. I want to get almost like there's a shadow underneath it. That's what transparencies are used for a lot. You're going to do transparency later with glass, but it's a different idea, okay? This is laying one thing over the top of the other, just like these sunglasses, or like a shadow casting it over my arm, okay? Think of the thing is still there, but the shadow reacts and goes around the form, okay? Good luck.